All right, we're going to get started, so go grab a seat. I know we have a lot of friends that are in the room, and it's fun to see everyone, but we're going to get started and get this rally going. So go ahead and grab a seat. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and his Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to Colorado Christian University. We are so happy to have you here today. We are here today to celebrate religious freedom and to honor our dear friend and neighbor, Jack Phillips. We are so proud of his courage, his dedication, his strength. In less than 1 month, Jack Phillips will be arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of religious freedom for all people. We are here today to send a strong message to the nation. We support our hometown hero. We stand with Jack Phillips, and good people of all faiths and no faiths support freedom of conscience and freedom of religion for all Americans. Today you will hear from a variety of people. People like Jack who are facing government persecution because of their faith. You will hear from legal experts who are on the front lines defending the rights of all people against government tyranny. You will hear from evangelical, Catholic, LDS, and Jewish faith leaders who will tell you that an attack on the rights of one person of faith is an attack on the rights of all people of faith. To begin our day, please stand for the prayer and pledge of allegiance and welcome Colorado Christian University students Ellen Densmore and Ethan Van Burskik.
Good morning. Will you pray with me? Father God, thank you for the community of freedom lovers who are gathered here today. Please turn our hearts to your truth, to the light and hope that you would have us share with the world. Equip us to defend what we believe and to be a voice for those who have no voice. Help us to stand firm for freedom of conscience and expression, but to do so with grace and brotherly love. Thank you for Jack and his unwavering commitment to family and freedom, and for so many others like him who are willing to put their businesses and their livelihoods at risk to stand for what's right. I pray your hand of blessing and protection over Jack and his family as the case goes before the Supreme Court. Your will be done, but Father, I pray for truth to prevail and for Jack to shine as a witness to your kingdom. Please bless the conversation that goes on here today. Prepare us to explain the reason for the hope that we have, and help us to live in such a way as to make people ask what is different about us. We pray all this in the name of your precious Son, Jesus. Amen.
Join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, we're going to begin today by watching a video from Alliance Defending Freedom about Jack's story. So we'll kick that off.
How did I come to love art? I've just always drawn. I like to see when you take a pencil or paper and you've got an idea and then watch it like come to life in front of you. So you'd like us to create a wedding cake that depicts kind of where you were when you proposed to her?
Yes.
Is that correct? Can you describe that for me?
In the mountains with a beautiful waterfall.
It's gorgeous.
There's just something special about doing the wedding cake because it's one of the most important days in her life. And so I really want to get that right. I want to make sure I do my best and get everything just right. And now I don't get to do that.
From an artistic standpoint, Jack could probably work in any medium that he wants to, and I think that he understood that this was the way that he wanted to express himself. I have been in the baking industry since 1979, and my sales role now, in my current position, I get out to see an awful lot of retail and wholesale bakers, and pretty often this situation with Jack will come up, and they'll say, well, you live in Denver, what's happening? And the vast majority of people are hugely behind Jack and hugely support his efforts to try to set this right.
When you talk to Jack about the toll that the case has taken on him, you can almost see the pain in his eyes when he talks about not being able to interact with the couple. He loves to be able to invest his creative, artistic talents in creating something that really is the beginning of what he believes is an inherently religious relationship. And he puts a piece of himself in it, which is, I think, why he's so great at designing wedding cakes.
I came to be a part of Masterpiece Cake Shop simply because it was my family's business. I was 13 when we opened, and I've just been there ever since. I think the reason people called and just had vile things to say about my dad or to my dad was because they had a misunderstanding of who he was and what he had done. It's not about refusing business. It's about having the freedom for him to artistically create something that allows him to honor Christ.
When I started Masterpiece Cake Shop, I want to have a really good cake, but I wanted it to be known for the artwork. And what I want it to be is a place where I can create art for people in my community, and I want them to know that cake came from Jack.
Jack is a man of serious faith. It influences everything he does. From the day he opened the cake shop, to how he named it, to how he treats his employees and helps his customers, to the kinds of cakes that he designs. And Jack is just one of many creative professionals that knew right away what cakes, what events he couldn't participate in. He has declined to participate in Halloween. He doesn't do cakes that are anti-American. Jack has even declined cakes to celebrate divorce. He has declined to do cakes that would be offensive or derogatory towards individuals, including LGBT individuals. There are a host of different events and themes that Jack has declined to do because he will not violate his core convictions when he's creating his cake art.
I remember that day very clearly, the day that our lives changed, possibly forever. We were helping some customers and some gentlemen walked in.
So I went around the desk and introduced myself. So I'm Jack, David, Charlie, pleased to meet you. We're here to look at wedding cakes. I said, it's for our wedding. And so right away I know this is not a cake that I can make. This is not an event that I can create for. So I tell them that, and so they're kind of surprised, like, what do you mean? So I'll sell you cookies, birthday cakes, whatever else I've got, but I just can't make this one. Then the phone rings about 20 minutes later, and somebody calls me up and says, are you the guy who just turned away the gay couple? So, no, I turned away a cake that they asked for, but I would never turn them away.
Very quickly after the phone started ringing, and then ringing again, and then very quickly we knew that something big was happening, and my dad told the rest of us not to answer the phone, mainly because of the content of the phone calls. And it was like that for weeks afterwards.
It didn't just end with the death threats and the hateful phone calls. Charlie and David picketed Jack's store, Masterpiece Cake Shop, and then they filed a complaint with the Civil Rights Commission. When we first heard about what was happening, we contacted Jack and offered to provide assistance. And when he found out that he was being sued and he was served with the papers, he reached out to us, and we were glad to help and to defend his rights and the rights of all creative professionals. The administrative law judge not only ruled against Jack by saying that he needed to stop doing wedding cakes altogether or violate his conscience, it ordered him to retrain his employees as well. And then they ordered him to report on a quarterly basis to the government what his artistic decisions were and what cakes he declined to create.
We had a good wedding business, good business all the way around. I had like 10 people working for me just shortly before David and Charlie came in. We're down to 4 now. Now they're not there. So people move on, they get other jobs, but there's still a hole that it's not always their choice to leave or my choice to get rid of them. It's like somebody else decided you can't do this, and so the choice was made for us. So we've lost those relationships as well, and that's as hard or harder than the money.
In June of 2017, Jack learned that the United States Supreme Court would hear his case. Jack represents what a pluralistic society looks like. Jack represents the freedom that we all should have to be able to disagree, to be able to be tolerant of one another, to be able to understand that the right of free speech, the right of the free exercise of religion, if we want it for ourselves, then we must extend it to others. You can support same-sex marriage and support Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Cake Shops. In fact, you should. And he's had plenty of customers come in and tell him just that they may be from the LGBT community, they may be of a different belief on marriage, but they understand that freedom is at stake and that we have to provide the space necessary for all of us to be able to live consistent with our beliefs.
I don't want anybody to have to go through what my family has gone through. If we win at the Supreme Court, it's not just about us. That's freedom for everyone. That's freedom to be able to create something that goes in accordance with your convictions.
Well, when we go to the Supreme Court and I stand on those steps, knowing the importance of this case, someone like me, a regular, ordinary person, citizen, to be able to go there, have them look at this very important issue through my eyes, nobody could conceive of that. We'll just have to wait and see.
We are so proud to partner with Alliance Defending Freedom and their good work defending Jack. Can we give Alliance Defending Freedom a round of applause? Friends, the Christian tradition is full of leaders who stood strong against government tyranny. Consider Moses and his bold demand to Pharaoh to let my people go. Daniel, who was told to pray only to the king, refused, thrown into the lion's den. God rescued and saved him. Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were told to bow down to the government, bow down to the king, refused and thrown into the furnace. God protected them as well. Or strong Queen Esther, who went before her king and demanded an end to the persecution of her people. Or Stephen, with eyes fixed upon the Lord, endured the stones of the religious majority of his day. Or the persecution deaths of Paul, Peter, Andrew, Philip, James, and even the modern persecution era of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. As Christians and as Americans, we honor and celebrate those who stand up to government tyranny. We teach our children these stories. We hope that if they were faced with the decision to honor God or bow down to the government, they would choose to honor God every single time. We want our children to grow up to be just like the saints in the Bible. And with us today are men and women who have the courage to stand for their faith against government tyranny. We want to send a message to the nation that religious freedom and freedom of conscience are critical to the foundation of this country. Men and women like Jack Phillips and Barronelle Stutzman are what make America great. From the opening shots of the American Revolution, we have boldly proclaimed to the world that we will fight against government tyranny, and especially against government tyranny opposed to religious freedom. To our friend Jack, And to all the speakers today who are being persecuted and are bold enough to stand up against government tyranny, I share Mordecai's words to Queen Esther. God has placed you here for just a time as this. Thank you for your boldness. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your commitment to the American principles, and thank you for inspiring a nation to stand strong for religious freedom. I stand with Jack Phillips. Colorado Christian University stands with Jack Phillips. If you stand with Jack Phillips, will you stand right now? Jack, we all stand with you. Jack, we all stand with you. May God bless you in this battle for religious freedom, and may God secure our religious freedom and freedom of conscience rights in America. I'm now proud to introduce the president of Colorado Christian University, Dr. Donald Sweeney.
Either conform, or else I will harry you out of this land, or else worse. Those were the words of King James I of England to a delegation of dissenting ministers who came to see him at Hampton Court in 1604. They asked for religious freedom to be faithful to the scriptures. That delegation was received with hostility by the king, who refused to pay respect to private conscience and insisted that they must conform. It was that hostility, along with religious persecution, that drove pilgrims in 1620 and later Puritans to the New England shores of our nation, a commemoration many of us remember this November. These English separatists left for what they called weighty and solid reasons. They wanted religious liberty for themselves. From history, we know that they did not practice this well among themselves. And so Roger Williams left and later founded Rhode Island. He too advocated religious liberty for Baptist, Quaker, Jewish minorities. He too was a staunch advocate of the freedom of conscience. The point is that this nation has always stood not simply for religious liberty, our first freedom, but for freedom of conscience. It has been identified as a core human right, affirmed by our founders, affirmed by the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Fast forward to 2012, when a complaint was filed by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission because a baker named Jack Phillips would not design a cake with messaging that went against his beliefs. The commission's ruling eerily echoed the words of King James, saying, "Either conform, or else I will harry you out of business, or worse." The commission's ruling was appealed, and this case has now gone to the U.S. Supreme Court. The mainstream media is billing this as a case where a baker is, quote, discriminating against a gay couple. That soundbite is a distortion of what actually took place, as you'll hear today. For Jack Phillips, who had dedicated his bakery to serving his master, he sold cakes to anyone who walked through the door. But as a Christian, there were some things he would not do. He would not design a cake with messaging that went against his convictions. He would not do cakes that were anti-American or that would disparage people or were lewd or celebrate divorce, etc. Contrary to what you may hear, to what the ACLU has charged, his convictions are not born out of hate. Jack lives by an ethic to love his neighbor no matter who his neighbor is. Freedom of conscience is enshrined, friends, in our founding documents. Freedom of conscience is the foundation of all freedoms. So to put this matter in perspective, let's just change some terms. Imagine an African-American baker who is committed to serving everyone who walks in his door, even white supremacists. But one day a white supremacist asks him to design a cake celebrating white supremacy, and this baker could not do that because it went against his conscience. It would be unthinkable to compel him to do this. Or imagine a Jewish baker who serves all her clients, even the ones she knows are anti-Semitic. But imagine one day one of these clients comes in and asks for a cake designed to celebrate the Holocaust. This goes against her conscience. It would be unthinkable to compel her to do this. Or imagine a liberal feminist baker who is asked to design a cake saying abortion stops a beating heart. Or imagine a Muslim baker who is asked and compelled to design a cake celebrating the Trinity. In each case, this would be unthinkable, just as for me, it's unthinkable to coerce a baker like Jack Phillips, a Christian, to design a cake celebrating something that violates his religious convictions. And it is for these reasons that I stand with Jack today. And I ask all Americans who support the freedom of conscience to do the same and to pray for the Supreme Court of the United States this December as they examine and then decide this case. But it's a strange coincidence that we're having this discussion in a season when we're remembering two historical events. On the one hand, many of us are remembering a transformative leader named Martin Luther who stood for freedom of conscience as well, standing up against an oppressive church tribunal when asked to recant in 1521 at the Imperial Council of Worms. He said, "My conscience is captive to the word of God. I cannot and I will not recant anything, for to do so is to go against conscience, and that's neither right nor safe. God help me." And on the other hand, we're reflecting on those pilgrims who came to our shores, motivated in large part by a belief in the freedom of conscience. May we not miss the significance of these two historical moments and the issue before us. The stakes have never been higher for religious liberty and freedom of conscience. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Managing Director of the Coalition for Jewish Values, Rabbi Yaakov Menken.
I am so grateful for this opportunity to be with you today with my thanks to Mr. Jeff Hunt, to Dr. Sweeting, to Amy Smith, and to Stacy Holt, and to everyone I don't know, the efforts that you've all put into making this event and to making sure that my voice was part of it. Because for those who haven't figured this out or noticed this yet, I'm Jewish. Who knew, right? But so besides being part of this incredible panoply of religious movements and denominations represented here, or should I say rainbow? Don't boo. Someone in the media will be broadcasting at Christian University. Boo's Rabbi. Can't do that. There's another very good reason for me to be here, which is that Jews have spent thousands of years being on the wrong end of discrimination and bigotry. Think of Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, as Mr. Hunt mentioned, the book of Esther, where Haman decides to exterminate the Jews. And for those who don't believe those stories reflect history, let's talk about expulsions, pogroms, massacres, and the Holocaust. They are right, but not in the way that they think. Jack Phillips says that he can only celebrate unions that accord with his beliefs. That is a positive statement, not a negative one. That is not discrimination, but discernment. Refuse to prepare me a wedding cake because I'm a Jew, and that's bigotry. But if you can only celebrate a Southern Baptist marriage, I understand and respect your religion, and I would never imagine that I could somehow coerce you to violate your precepts. And that's called tolerance. And let me point out that if Mr. Phillips were to offer me a cake when one of my children, God willing, reaches this milestone, I would say, thank you very much, Jack. But since you're not running a kosher bakery, I can't eat your cake. And my desire to keep kosher is in no way discriminatory against Mr. Phillips or anyone else. And neither is his desire to honor his own faith. Although if you do want to go kosher, I have people you can talk to. You know what Jack's problem is? He's not discriminating enough. If he really did only bake cakes for evangelicals celebrating their union, you couldn't call it discrimination. He wouldn't bake for Jews, he wouldn't bake for Catholics. And no one at the ACLU would be able to jump up and try to call it something that it's not. But no, Jack had to simply follow what it says in the Bible. This is not in Leviticus, by the way. This is about the book of Genesis. It's very simple. In the book of Genesis, it says man and female, man and woman, he created them. And then it says the man will cleave to his wife and they shall be one flesh. A reference to having children. The Bible connects marriage to be fruitful and multiply. And God says, and Jack says, as long as it's a man and a woman who are capable of becoming one flesh, I'm down with that. Because that's what the Bible says. You know why the courts are confused? Because there are only two genders. Because there are only two genders, the courts can pretend to be confused between favoring what the Bible calls matrimony and discriminating against what the Bible calls abomination. If space aliens were to land tomorrow, they would solve the problem. Now, some of you probably think I'm nuts, but let me explain. Let's imagine E.T. comes to Earth tomorrow. And someone falls in love with E.T. and decides to get married to E.T. Trust me, in 2 years, the Supreme Court would decide that under the U.S. Constitution, E.T. and Sally or Bill can get married. But because aliens are not human beings, then despite what you've seen on Star Trek, it would be impossible for aliens and humans to have children together. That would be the biblical definition of marriage, and Jack Phillips would not be able to bake them a cake. And then it would be obvious that he's not discriminating against anyone. He's not singling out same-gender couples for exclusion. On the contrary, he is saying he can only celebrate a biblical marriage that involves a human man and a human woman. And the ACLU would have to pack up and go home. Are your lawyers taking notes, Jack? I hope they are, because guess what's coming next? If they can do this to the baker, well, the ADF already knows. They're doing this to Arlene's Flowers in the state of Washington. They might even do that to the minister. Oh, wait a minute. They already did that in the fine state of Idaho. And now that the Hitching Post Wedding Chapel has reincorporated, thanks to the ADF, as providing only Christian religious services, don't I feel excluded? The ACLU says they can't even sell flowers. The courts are saying that religion is limited to how we talk and where we worship, and there is no protection regarding how we act and what behaviors we support. Now, some of you may feel differently, but if free exercise of religion means running off at the mouth, hey, Doc, the Supreme Court says I am exercising. Need I tell you? Need I tell you that this is dangerous to no one more than Jews? Because our religion is all about action. The way we tie our shoes in the morning is a religious act. The fact that we dress and look differently is exercise of our religion. And we have libraries of books on how to do business in accordance with our faith. And our legal codes tell us that we are to give up our lives rather than buckle to government pressure to change the color of our shoelaces. The Colorado Civil Rights Division and the lower courts have decided to force Mr. Phillips to change the way he practices his religion or give up his business. If exercise of religion does not include exercise, then government can tell Jews whether we can do kosher slaughter or circumcise a child, because both of those are also done by trained professionals. So no, if you tell us that we have freedom of speech and freedom of worship, but we cannot let religion guide how we do business, that is not religious freedom. And we Jews have seen this before. We have long, bitter, deadly experience with governments trying to force us to follow earlier versions of political correctness. What is new and profoundly disturbing is the misuse of the language of civil rights to trample civil rights. Just a few weeks ago, members of Abolish Human Abortion were ejected from a coffee shop operated by a gay man. They were denied service with prejudice and with profanity. They did nothing inside the shop except ask for coffee. The owner deduced that if they opposed abortion on demand, they were probably in favor of biblical morality in other areas as well. So let there be no doubt about what's really going on. The owner claimed that they were, quote, trying to stir up hate, though their literature talked about human rights and targeted no one. The owner projected his own bigotry onto them to justify denying them their civil rights. A writer for LGBTQ Nation said, quote, right-wing blogs are enraged that a gay coffee shop owner kicked out a group of anti-choice religious nutjobs. Listen carefully. Only right-wingers are bothered. Everyone else knows that anti-choice religious nutjobs don't deserve a seat at the counter. And at Out.com, they made it explicit, praising the store owner for denying the group service, and I quote, based on their religious beliefs. That's right. It's not about tolerance. It's not about treating everyone with human dignity, and it's certainly not about opposing discrimination. On the contrary, the people who are doing this are not against discrimination. Out.com celebrates bigotry and discrimination against people of faith. And yet, for some reason, we all know how far the members of Abolish Human Abortion would get were they to decide to sue. In the current environment, it's only people of faith who can be described as bigots. That is why this case is so important and why the wrong decision would be so dangerous, because the people who sued Jack Phillips are not opposed to discrimination, but expert practitioners of the craft. And if they can do this to Christians, you can be darn well sure they're gonna do it to Jews. Jack, you're fighting for all of us. You're fighting for every American who tries to be guided by conviction and faith. And that is why it is so important that you win. And we wish you Godspeed and good luck. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Assistant Professor of Legal Studies at Colorado Christian University, Dr. Jenna Ellis.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for coming and for participating in this event, where it is so important to protect and preserve religious liberty and freedom of conscience here in America. I am so proud to be a professor at Colorado Christian University that stands with Jack. I'm so proud to be an allied attorney here in Colorado with Alliance Defending Freedom that represents Jack. We are here today to celebrate our first freedoms. This case is not about a cake. It goes to the core of who we are as human beings made in the image of God and have to recognize and understand and answer life's most critical questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Who is God? What does he want from me? Our founders understood that our first freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, preserved and protected through our Bill of Rights, are the right to fundamentally have freedom of conscience and understand what it is we believe about the common human experience. Without freedom of speech, we couldn't talk about God. Without freedom of association, we couldn't be here today to talk to each other about God. And ultimately, without free exercise of religion and worship and freedom of conscience, we couldn't speak and associate to commonly understand and promote God in society. This case goes to the core of who we are. Our founders recognized that truth is discoverable. As C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity and the Abolition of Man, our rights come from our Creator. And our founders recognized and unanimously preserved that in our Declaration of Independence. They said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by our Creator, not our government, with certain unalienable rights. And we are here to celebrate the unalienable right of freedom of conscience and freedom to believe and to worship. The message here today is to ensure that our government also understands its proper role and scope. Our government is mandated by our Declaration of Independence not to coerce or to compel speech that we disagree with, not to coerce or compel a religious belief, but rather to protect and preserve the rights that we already have, pre-existing government, because we are each individually human beings made in the image of God. Jack has become an icon for this belief. And I am so proud of the stand that he is taking for Christ. I hope that all of us today will be encouraged and emboldened to understand our unalienable rights, to preserve and protect our liberty and freedom in America. Because this is not a religious issue. This is not just a conservative issue. This isn't even just a Colorado issue. This is an American issue. Where is our country headed? I am so proud to live in a country that has, since 1787, protected and preserved our unalienable rights and recognized that truth is, ultimately. So whether it is one person like Jack, or we had tens of millions of people in this congregation and this association today, truth does not change. Our rights do not change. And ultimately, truth remains. So Jack, we love you because you are our friend. We respect you because of the stand that you are taking for Christ. And ultimately, we support you because freedom of conscience is your unalienable right. May God grant you favor with the United States Supreme Court. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Legal Counsel and Communications Director for Alliance Defending Freedom, Carrie Kupek.
Good morning. On behalf of Alliance Defending Freedom, Senior Counsel Kristen Wagner, who you saw in that video, will be arguing the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. We are just so thankful to be here and thankful for your support of our client, Jack Phillips. I want to give a special thanks to Jeff Hunt, Stacy Holtz, and Professor Jenna Ellis for hosting us. It's such a privilege to be here, and we're so thankful. So yes, we are here today to support Jack Phillips. But we're here today because we love freedom. As Americans, loving freedom, pursuing freedom, is our collective identity. The freedom to believe, and not just believe, but act on those beliefs, is who we are. Freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, this is our DNA. And let's not forget, America did not create religious freedom. Religious freedom created America. But unfortunately, these freedoms are in jeopardy, which is why Jack Phillips is at the Supreme Court. And to be very, very clear, Jack Phillips and other people who you will hear from today, they serve all who walk through their doors. But as artists, as creative professionals, they cannot and should not be forced to create messages for events that violate their faith, their conscience, and who they are. Should a Republican speechwriter be forced to write for Hillary Clinton? I don't think so. And likewise, should a Democrat speechwriter be forced to write for President Trump? Should an atheist singer be compelled by government coercion to sing at a Catholic mass? Should a Muslim t-shirt printer be forced to create custom t-shirts with messages that directly violate the teachings of the Quran? In other words, this issue transcends marriage. But since this particular case has to do with a wedding, let's talk about that for a moment. The belief about marriage as a man-woman union has been held since the beginning of time. It cuts across race, it cuts across culture. This is what Christianity, Judaism, and Islam teach, and it's something that both religious people and non-religious people alike believe. So my question is this: are we as a nation planning to drive out Muslim, Jewish, and Christian artists from the marketplace, from the public square? Because that's, frankly, where we're headed. And as the Supreme Court itself said in the Obergefell same-sex marriage decision, beliefs about marriage, these particular beliefs about marriage, are decent and honorable. So the bottom line is this: in a truly free society, tolerance is a two-way street. Not a zero-sum game where the government can crush someone simply for having a different opinion. The America that we know and the America that we love is a place where all artists and creative professionals are free to peacefully speak and create work and art and expression that's consistent with their convictions and their conscience. That is what makes America great. And that's all Jack Phillips is asking for at the U.S. Supreme Court. Thank you very much.
Please welcome the owner of Arlene's Flowers in Richland, Washington, Baronel Stutzman.
It's my privilege here to stand with Jack and Debbie. And I want to encourage all to stand for our precious microphone. I encourage all of you to stand for our religious freedoms. We've always had the freedom to speak and act consistent with our beliefs. But those core beliefs are now being challenged, and they'll disappear if we aren't willing to stand. My name is Baronel Stutzman. I have a little flower shop in Richland, Washington. We've been in business for 47 years, had all types of employees and customers. We're on our third generation of prom flowers, and we're blessed to be in the business we're in. And I live my life and my business according to my faith, to treat all people with love and respect. One of the gentlemen who's suing me, Rob Ingersoll, was one of my customers for almost 10 years. I waited on Rob for all types of events and did all types of custom floral arrangements for him. I knew Rob was gay. It was never an issue. I loved making unique floral arrangements for him, and he loved my work. After Washington State redefined marriage, Rob came in to talk to me about getting married. And before he got too far, I just gently put my hands on his, and I said, Rob, I'm sorry, but I can't do your wedding because of my relationship with Jesus Christ. He understood. To me, a marriage is between a man and a woman, and it symbolizes Christ's relationship to his church. I referred Rob to 3 different florists, which I knew would do him a good job. If Rob walked into my store tomorrow, I would catch up on his life. I would hug him, and I would wait on him for another 10 years if he would let me. But now I'm being sued by the Washington State Attorney General and the ACLU. We face losing everything we own, our retirement, our life savings, our business. And it's hard to believe that we could lose all that simply because we've referred a longtime customer that I couldn't create a custom arrangement for his wedding. I lost at Washington Supreme Court. The vote was 9-0. And we are taking our case to the Supreme Court, and we're waiting to hear if they will accept it. Rob has every freedom to live according to his beliefs, and that's all we're asking. If the government can come in and tell you what to say, what to think, what to believe, what to create, then we do not live in a free America. I want to thank you for being here and prayers for Jack's case on December 5th. Jack knows the stakes. He's steadfast, unmovable, and I pray for all of us that we will follow that example. Thank you.
Please welcome the CEO of Catholic Charities of Denver, Larry Smith.
Dr. Sweeney, Jeff, thank you very much for the invitation. It's humbling to be up here in the company of some of the people that are speaking and some of the amazing things that they've done. It's very interesting how many religious freedom cases have originated in Colorado recently. The Little Sisters of the Poor, who run the Mullen Home for Seniors, the Hercules Industry case, both of these centered around the Obama administration HHS mandate regarding birth control. That same issue forced Catholic Charities to change its entire health care plan and spend more than $500,000 a year to do so and protect our religious freedom to practice what we believe. Of course, the one that we're here today for, that of Jack and Masterpiece Cake Shop, I'd like to briefly discuss some of the social aspects of the case of living out and practicing our faith and the unalienable rights of freedom of religion. It's interesting how simple and yet how complex religious freedom can be. Simple in the sense that it is one of those unalienable rights embedded in the very First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And make no mistake, it is freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. And yet, it is complex in that it opens so many doors that can confuse and confound those of us trying to live out our faith in our daily lives. How do we love someone who professes to have no religion and claims that we violate their freedom of religion by simply having one? How do we live out our Christian faith while still showing love, mercy, and compassion of Jesus Christ for the people who are challenging us, hating us, screaming at us, smearing us, and accusing us of things we did not do? In the last, I've had the pleasure of being at Catholic Charities for about 4.5 years. And in that time, we've had close to $450,000 that have been grants or gifts that have come from someone, and they only asked us to change one little thing. One person asked us not to mention God when we prayed. True story. Just don't mention God. Okay, well, I said, I can't do that because they want us to say spirit. And I said, well, you know, the only true spirit I know is the devil, and we're not going to talk about him. So we're going to have to mention God, who is both man and God, right? Another asked us if we would just change our name, that saint in that one name you have, we could just change it to, you know, drop the saint name. It goes on. In each of these cases, we thanked them for their offer, and we said, keep your money. We're not going to be changing anything about what we're doing. And I'm happy to tell you that in each case, thanks to the power, the love, mercy, and compassion of Jesus Christ and living out our faith, every one of them gave us the money anyway. That's why I know Jack is going to persevere. I know that because he believes, and because God is all-powerful, and all the money and all the decisions are his anyway, and in the end, we all know we win, Jack is going to win. I know the Newland family personally from Hercules, and I know the Little Sisters of the Poor. And the thing that I can tell you about them and their cases is that they live their lives with courage and conviction. They are prepared to witness their faith and the love of Jesus Christ no matter what the cost, because they know, as Archbishop Charles Chaput, formerly of Denver, now of Philadelphia, said, truth exists whether we like it or not. We don't get to create truth. And we find it, and we don't have the power to change it to our taste. Truth simply exists, and that truth is Jesus Christ. So, I just met Jack for the first time. I've heard about him, I've read about him. I know people that know him and speak incredibly highly of him, and I'm very grateful for your courage. But what I have known, what I've seen, is that he is truly living a life by his convictions. He is a true man of courage. Living out his faith, he has made a choice to confront agony, pain, danger, uncertainty, and intimidation from all walks of life. He is, as was the original apostles, he is the man who has chosen the better path, the path that we should all choose. And if we all had the courage to stand up and say no to the money if it asks us to give up an aspect of our religious freedom, no to a favor if we would just change this one little thing about how we pray, no to someone who is coming to us and asking us if we could just do this one little thing, even though we know it's against, just this one time. When we say no and we live up to that, then we are people of courage, and God will bless us all. And then we're like Jack. And we have that opportunity to live our life and to be blessed by the love, mercy, and compassion of Jesus Christ. I also, when I see Jack, I don't see a man looking for limelight or hero status, just a man trying to be faithful to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Ironically, there is nothing more courageous or hero-like in our society today. You know, at Catholic Charities, we serve everybody. I literally have had people say, now, you guys just serve Catholics, right? It's like, well, I don't know, because I don't know of a Catholic card that I can, check to find out what their religious belief is. And you only hire Catholics. And I'm like, well, again, you got me there, because we don't ask if you're Catholic when we hire you. What we do is we ask you to live your life according to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And for those people that come to us, as the people that came to Jack, we ask them what they need. That's how we qualify them. We qualify them based on the need. And we meet them right where they are. We never condone or enable sin. We won't do things that violate the teachings or dogma or doctrine of our church and Jesus Christ. But we will love them. We will care for them. We will ask David when he comes in, how's your life? And we'll catch up, right? We never judge them. We try and help them. And in helping them, we introduce them to Jesus Christ. And then it's between them and God, right? Where that relationship goes. That's the best that we can offer. So when I see Jack and I see a man believing in his faith, I am overwhelmed at the courage that he has displayed. For some of us who believe in the tradition or the Christian definition of marriage, we can often find ourselves on the wrong side of a conversation. It's difficult to disagree with someone who is passionate about their beliefs, even if they're wrong. Unfortunately, the conversation around these topics has gotten increasingly vitriolic, antagonistic, and in many cases, vicious. People are painting those of us with knowledge of the truth and the courage to live it out as bigots, racists, homophobes, etc., etc., etc. But like Jack, we're called to love those people anyway. I love the way Jack handled the situation, explained to those two men why he could not make them a special ordered cake, and then offered to provide them other products and told them of other shops that could help them. I don't believe that Jack has ever been accused of yelling or screaming or calling those men names. He has simply stood up for his faith and conviction. He has said, I know the truth, and I'm not going to turn my back on the truth, which, by the way, includes treating his accusers with love, mercy, and kindness. And that, my friend, is why you are really an amazing human being. To stand up and witness the truth, the way and the light of Jesus Christ, no matter the cost, this takes courage. This is why I'm here today, to support a man of true courage who has risked his very livelihood to stand up for his faith. We try and do that every day at Catholic Charities. We try and help people because they are made in the image and likeness of God, and they are true brothers and sisters, children of God, and there but for the grace of God, go us all, right? We're that close from being homeless. We're that close from being addicted to this or to that, or to having had a relationship, and a child outside of wedlock that we're now trying to reconcile with. So when we think about all these various issues, and we think about how we can live our lives to support Jack, it's in loving your brothers and sisters, it's being compassionate, it's sharing our faith in a real, tangible way, and never backing down from someone who tells us that we can't believe in our faith, in our Jesus Christ, God the Father Almighty. Jack, thank you for everything you're doing. God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome State Senator Kevin Lumberg.
Thank you very much. It is a privilege to be here and to be a part of this very important rally where we look forward to the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. I've been asked to give just a few moments of reflection on what is happening back here at home on the legislative side of things. Because as I looked at what did occur through this decision from the Civil Rights Commission to Jack Phillips, I realized that Colorado law needs some changes. So that's right. So I introduced a piece of legislation this year which we called the right to disagree, that simply addressed the issue that Jack Phillips has the problem with, which is the laws and the way they're being applied are violating the principles of freedom for the individual citizens. And a business owner should be able to define the scope of their practice. Now, I don't need to go into details. You've heard all the particulars, but that's correct. I introduced that bill, and it was defeated. Unfortunately, it was defeated. Not a big surprise, understanding some of the political realities we have down at the state capitol, but I'm happy to tell you that if you look across our nation, there actually has been a resurgence of legislation introduced defending religious liberty. This year, the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation identified over 200 religious liberty bills and other measures that were introduced, and of those, 30 were adopted. They came from 46 states and the U.S. Congress. 30 were adopted, which was a 750% increase over what we saw in 2016. Now, but there's more to give here, very briefly. The Civil Rights Commission is, the commissioners are appointed by the governor. And then it's required that the Senate give consent and advice and consent for the governor's appointments and approve the appointment. So he had one of the commissioners came up for reappointment, and the governor reappointed that person, and the Senate reviewed the individual and their appointment in this past session. And first time I've ever seen this, the Senate rejected that appointment. But there's more, because the governor ignored the Senate's rejection, and that person continues to serve on the Civil Rights Commission. But there is more, and that is the actual Civil Rights Commission comes up for reauthorization in 2018. And I want to tell you that I and many of my colleagues are committed to changing the rules for the Civil Rights Commission so that it is actually defends the civil rights of the people of Colorado, including Jack Phillips. We need to change the way the commissioners are appointed. We need to change the mission they have, because we need to defend the liberties of everyone, and I assure you, we will fight for that in 2018. Thank you very much.
Please welcome the owner of Telescopic Media, Carl and Angel Larson.
Good morning. My name is Carl Larson, and my wife Angel is in the back with our two oldest children. Together, we own Telescope Media Group in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and our business exists to glorify God through top-quality media production. Telescopes are designed to make big things look more like they really are. Similarly, we believe that our lives are designed to magnify God and make Him look more like He really is. As filmmakers, we're in the business of telling stories. In particular, we love telling the story of how God made marriage as a means of revealing Himself to the world, and we'd love to tell the story of what marriage is, why it exists, through the films that we create in our business. Personally, Angel and I have been discovering this grand story through our own marriage for the past 15 years. We now have 7 children, 2 of whom are adopted from Ethiopia, and an 8th child that we're raising as our own. This is part of God's story for us. We also want to discover the story of God for others and tell these stories as best as possible. Stories about the glory of God in marriage deserve to be told. So when I heard about a law in Minnesota that would force us to promote same-sex marriage if we chose to promote films celebrating marriage between one man and one woman, I was deeply concerned. Should we really go to jail for believing what Christians, Judaism, and Islam teach about marriage, and in what has been understood across races and cultures since the beginning of time? It was shocking. Free speech and religious freedom are constitutional guarantees that are good for everyone. But under this law, it's clear that these cherished freedoms are under attack. We love people. We love all people. And we invite the world, particularly people who are different from us, into our home regularly. This includes people with different political views, religious views, people who identify as LGBT, and they join us around our table and even sign their names underneath it. So to be clear, our case, just like my friend Jack's case, is about the message that we're asked to promote, never the person making the request. We work with all people. We just don't promote every message or celebrate every story. The bottom line is that my case, our cases, are not just about our freedom. They're about the freedom of any storyteller, any creative professional, whatever their convictions may be. All Americans should be free to create consistently with their convictions without fear of government punishment. Free speech and religious freedom are rights that make our world a better place. They're freedoms I don't want to lose. Today, I'm here to stand with Jack, freedom for all creative professionals. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director of Colorado Family Action, Debbie Chavez.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Jack, and to be in the same room with you and just have this wonderful send-off as you go and stand for all of our rights. So thank you. I want to start off with a quote from Sir Peter Bazalgette. Imagine society with civilizing influence of the arts, and you'll have to, taking out the arts, and you'll have to strip out what is most pleasurable in life. Much of that is educationally vital. Take the collective memory from our museums, remove the bands from our schools, the choirs from our communities, lose the emphatic plays and dance of our theaters, or the books from our libraries. expunge our festivals, literature, and painting, and you've left society bereft of a national conversation. We're here today because freedom matters to all of us as individuals. Part of that freedom requires that we be allowed to have our internal compass direct our outward actions. The ability to create art and the expression of artistic talent is a benefit to all society, and we can't take that for granted. Government intrusion in that expression seeks to manipulate that true north compass that's inside of us and dictate to us how we personally express our beliefs. Masterpiece Cake Shop's name actually was inspired by a Bible verse, Ephesians 2:10. We are God's masterpiece. He's created us anew in Jesus Christ so we can do the good things that he planned for us long ago. The definition of a masterpiece is a work of outstanding artistry and skill. It's the best that an artist can create. And you know what's cool about that? Jack actually seeks to create that masterpiece with every special order cake that he makes. He doesn't take for granted that it just needs to be another cookie cutter design. He makes sure that he designs those cakes so that they are a unique reflection of the events that they're supposed to represent. Today we're here, Jack, because it matters that you're taking on this stand for all of us. We're so grateful. Micah 6:8 says, "What does the Lord require of you but to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God?" Jack, you've done that well. Justice is actually written in the government context in that verse. And that's what's so exciting, that you're standing for all of us. Baronel, we know that the fight that you've been through. And Carl, we're so grateful. Thank you for showing up today and for standing collectively for the voice of freedom. God bless you.
Representing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, please welcome author and professor Stephen Collis.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm an attorney who represents religious institutions across the country, an author and a law professor. I'm not here today as one of the attorneys in Jack's case, but as a scholar and author who is an advocate for religious freedom. I'm an advocate for religious freedom not because I believe it is a tool that can be used to harm others, but because it is a fundamental liberty that protects each and every individual living in this country. It has allowed us, those who live in the most religiously diverse country in human history, to exist in relative peace with one another. This peace is unique in history, and it is even exceptional in the world today. As one scholar explained it, in history that was recent to the American founders, governmental attempts to suppress disapproved religious views had caused vast human suffering in Europe and in England, and similar suffering on a smaller scale in the colonies that became the United States, end quote. For centuries prior to the founding of this country, various religious sects tried to control government and then tried to manufacture peace by suppressing any religious views or practices that contradicted those of the people in power. The result was nothing but conflict, and virtually no one was left unscathed. It is important to note that it was not religion that led to this suffering. It was a lack of religious liberty. This is true because if you think about it, every human on this earth has some religious belief. People on both the right and the left sometimes bristle at that notion. But when we think of certain religious questions, such as, is there a God? Why are we on this earth? Where will we go when we die? We realize that all of us have answers to those questions, and those answers are religious answers. The answer may be an agnostic, I don't know, but it is still a religious answer. And those religious answers deserve protection. It isn't those answers that lead to war and conflict. It is a refusal by one faction or another to protect those answers. By the time of the founding, it had become clear to Madison and others that this new country they were trying to form needed to find a way to end the bloodshed. Madison saw the solution in a way that no one else had to that point. He wrote, "Torrents of blood have been spilt in the old world by vain attempts of the secular arm to extinguish religious discord and to prevent all differences in religious opinions. time has at length revealed the true remedy. Every relaxation of narrow and rigorous policy, wherever it has been tried, has been found to assuage the disease. That is to say, every time government has allowed religious people to have the religious exemptions they need if they are conscientious objectors, it has assuaged the disease of war and bloodshed. Madison goes on, the American theater has exhibited proofs that equal and complete liberty, if it does not wholly eradicate the conflict, sufficiently destroys its malignant influence on the health and prosperity of the state. In other words, to rephrase what Madison was saying, wherever possible, when government recognizes exemptions for religious objectors to laws that otherwise apply to everyone else, the conflict between people of different and sometimes even very opposite beliefs tends to dissipate. In our country, Madison's foresight has proven true time and time again. And what is remarkable is the breadth with which religious liberty, when properly applied, has protected our citizenry. Let me give just a few examples. I could go on for an entire year at a law school like I do. Let me just give a few examples. They involve people of very different religious beliefs. What binds them together is one unbreakable thread that stretches and twines across the United States. The principle that religious liberty is a liberty for all of us, one that is our country's great gift to the world, one that protects us regardless of our beliefs, and one that we must not take for granted. I think you'll notice a familiar pattern in each of these cases. They each involve a law or regulation that didn't burden the majority of people. They each involve a religious dissenter who asked to be exempted from the law because of his or her religious beliefs. And they each involve a respect and recognition for religious liberty that is too often completely lacking in much of our society today. The first involves the Quakers. Very early in the history of the United States, the Quakers both refused to take oaths and to serve in the military. The general rule was that every able-bodied man needed to join the military. The founders could have forced them to do so. They could have demanded, do as we say or you face fine, a prison, or both. Instead, they offered exemptions. George Washington wrote to the Quakers, I assure you very explicitly, he said, that in my opinion, the conscientious scruples of all men should be treated with great delicacy and tenderness. And it is my wish and desire that the laws may always be as extensively accommodated to them as the essential interest of the nations may justify and permit, end quote. As a result, the Quakers were able to contribute to the founding of this nation without conflict. Just a short time later, in 1813, for another example, a Catholic priest named Anthony Coleman was doing his duty in what was then a still rural Manhattan. Someone approached him and confessed that they had been involved in a jewelry theft. As part of the penance process, the confessor gave the jewelry to the priest, Mr. Coleman, who then returned it to its rightful owner. The police wanted to know who the confessor was and demanded that Coleman testify, and they took him to court and demanded that he testify who had given him the jewelry. The general rule was that those with knowledge important to the legal process were required to testify. Coleman asked for an exemption on the basis that to Catholics, the secrecy of the confessional was an absolute religious requirement. He could not reveal who had confessed to him without violating his sacred religious beliefs. The majority view was that the Catholic doctrine was wrong and posed a great threat to society. That was what the prosecutor argued. The judge in the case saw things differently. He was a Protestant. He didn't agree with the Catholic priest's religious views. Still, he ruled, and this is his quote, "It cannot for a moment be believed that the mild and just principles of the law would place the witness in such a dreadful predicament, in such a horrible dilemma. If he tells the truth, he violates his ecclesiastical oath. If he prevaricates, he violates his judicial oath. The only course is for the court to declare that he shall not testify at all." The judge continued, "Although no human legislature has a right to meddle with religion, yet the history of the world is a history of oppression and tyranny over the consciousness of men. The sages who formed our Constitution sought to prevent the introduction of calamities that have deluged the world with tears and blood," end quote. That priest, Anthony Coleman, walked free from that New York courtroom. Over a century and a half later, in the summer of 1959, long after the development of Manhattan and the bloody battles of the Civil War, a middle-aged office manager at a Bethesda, Maryland construction company slogged up the steps of another courthouse. His name was Roy Torcaso. He sought an appointment as a notary public. shouldn't have been too difficult to pull off. There was only one problem. The general rule in Maryland at the time was that to be a notary public, you had to sign an oath declaring that you believed in God. Roy was many things. He was a veteran of 2 wars, World War II and the Korean War. He was a family man. He was a dedicated father, a devoted husband, a son, a handyman, a lover of chess, and a thoughtful philosopher. He was also an atheist. The clerk gave him an impossible choice: profess a belief he did not hold and get the job, or hold to his beliefs and face exclusion from the profession of his choice. Roy challenged the law. Needless to say, his beliefs were not popular. He was seeking an exemption from the general rule. He lost in the trial court. He lost unanimously in the Maryland Court of Appeals. When his case reached the Supreme Court, he won 9-0. The court stated, quote, "We repeat and again reaffirm that neither a state nor the federal government can constitutionally force a person to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion. No person can be punished for entertaining or professing religious beliefs or disbeliefs, for church attendance or non-attendance," end quote. Those are just a few examples, but the list goes on and on. Throughout our country's history, religious liberty has protected Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Sikhs, agnostics, atheists, the Amish, Seventh-day Adventists, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, and dozens of other creeds. And in every instance, the cases involved people like Jack, who were willing to put their reputations and livelihoods at risk for their religious convictions, hoping along the way that someone, a judge or government official, would understand the importance of their cause. I don't know how the justices will rule in this particular case, but I do hope that they will treat this very important liberty with reverence. I urge them to cherish it as the founders did. If it is treated flippantly, if it is wrongly discarded as nothing more than a justification for bigotry, every single one of us will lose. And I do mean every single one of us, including those people who think they oppose Mr. Phillips. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, representing Congressman Doug Lamborn, Pastor Jeff Anderson.
Let me just begin pastorally. Jack and the entire Phillips family, as well as these other artists and business owners, let me just remind you, God is on our side. I will not fear. What can man do unto me? Let me remind you what was expressed already in the book of Daniel. Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us. And let me remind you that all things do work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And all of you have been called to an extremely high purpose, and we're very grateful to stand with you today. It is truly an honor for each of us to stand here today. I would like to thank Colorado Christian University for holding this important event. My name is Pastor Jeff Anderson, and I work for Congressman Doug Lamborn. He represents the Colorado 5th District, which is bordering Jack's district. And Jack, I just want you to be sure that even though you are not one of my congressman's constituents, I can assure you that he would claim you if he could. The congressman's not able to be with us today. He has responsibilities in Washington, D.C., including votes and other obligations. And so, though he was not able to be with us today, he wanted to be sure to send someone who would be able to stand on this particular occasion. Jack's livelihood, as we all know, as well as the freedom of speech and expression of all Americans, is at stake in this case. Soon it's going to be before the Supreme Court, very soon, in just another month on December 5th. We must remember that the rights of conscience for everyone are at stake in this case. If we restrict freedom of speech or freedom of exercise in one area, there's nothing from stopping those restrictions from spreading to others. Yesterday, it may be Jack. Today, it may be you. Tomorrow, it may be me. All of us should be very concerned about this case. American history, our founding values, the legal precedent have long protected the rights of citizens to live out their differing beliefs and opinions. Why should it be any different in this case? The offense here is not that Jack won't create his masterpiece for certain occasions. The true offense is that the Colorado Rights Civil Commission is trying to force him to create a masterpiece approving of something that he does not believe in. When you consider Jack's privilege to express himself, his art comes with a set of principles that guide him. If he were asked to violate those principles in his artwork, he's already expressed that he will not violate those principles. There is no government that should be allowed to force him to violate those principles of artistic expression in his own private business. I want to cite at least two other people who would agree with me when it comes to artistic freedom and freedom of expression. First of all is Ryan Baumberger. He's of the Radiance Foundation. He's an outspoken activist on behalf of African Americans and the unborn. He understands racism as well as discrimination, and he also is an Emmy Award-winning creative professional who understands artistic freedom. Listen to what he has to say about Jack and others facing similar government coercion. Artistic expression cannot be controlled, cannot be dictated, cannot be legislated. Yet this is exactly what is happening with photographers and cake artists and florists and people like me. I don't want the government to tell me how to create, because the moment that there is this kind of control, there is no longer artistic freedom, and then there is no longer art. Then there's Dean Nielsen, the chairman and co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, who also supports Jack, and here's what his analysis is of what Jack is facing. Jack is a modern representation of someone who went through what African Americans have gone through. He simply wants to live his life peaceably, to conduct himself and to run his business without being bothered, and yet he's being subjugated and ostracized simply because of what he believes. In September, Congressman Lamborn proudly signed onto a congressional amicus brief along with 80 of his colleagues on Jack's behalf. He stands proudly in support of Jack and all Americans like him who simply want to freely express and live out their deeply held beliefs. Freedom. Freedom is an idea that's so central to our very identity as a nation that as citizens, it's hard for us to understand why Jack has had to travel this difficult journey over the past 5 years. When any government entity forces artists to create masterpieces that represent something that artists cannot endorse in good conscience, can anyone consider us to be truly free? It seems that some have forgotten what freedom is. And so we pray that the Supreme Court will stand on the side of freedom, that artists like Jack can continue to serve their communities with their God-given talents and abilities, not violating their God-given conscience. On behalf of the Congressman, Doug Lamborn, thank you for welcoming me here today. Jack, thank you again for your conviction, for your reliance, for your courage. You're a common American who has become a true hero, and we are honored to stand alongside you. May God bless you.
Please welcome Colorado State Senate Majority Leader Chris Holbert.
Hello. I hope to be one of the most conservative people in elected office who you will meet or interact with, who holds a liberal arts degree. My parents raised me to embrace and celebrate and discover different cultures, different people, food and language. Faith came late for me. My father-in-law witnessed to me on my first wedding anniversary in 1987, and I received Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in June of 1992. But my liberal arts degree and my childhood has prepared me to be in the state Senate, where we have a Republican-controlled Senate and a Democrat-controlled House and a Democrat governor. in a very diverse state where people in very diverse communities send us to the Capitol, where we're not just allowed to disagree, but we're really charged to disagree, to represent those different communities. One of the things that I'm most grateful for about the Colorado General Assembly is that this year we had 681 bills introduced, and 62% of those bills passed both chambers and went to the governor. Most people would guess a single-digit number, some maybe 10 or 20%. But Colorado is indeed a diverse state. But we have found a way to work together. I cannot imagine this nation, as we heard earlier, being confronted with a government that would force you to agree with me. Force anyone to agree with anyone else. Religious liberty is protected in the First Amendment of the Constitution, and yet we have a state law here that protects, through public accommodation, people of certain classifications, groups, diversity. My ask for you, whether you are a Christian, a Jew, Muslim, any other faith, or even a person who does not hold faith, is look to our diverse United States Supreme Court to side with, I believe, diversity. Allow you to be you and me to be me. Allow us to make the decisions in our lives that are best for us. Religious liberty, freedom of conscience. That's my prayer. I hope it is yours. And for the U.S. Supreme Court, let freedom have a new birth here in our nation. And let us celebrate who we are as a nation and individuals. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the owner of Hands On Originals, Blaine Adamson.
Before I get started, I really want to thank you all for putting this on for my friend Jack. I think it's been a great encouragement for all of us, honestly. So, thank you. Well, my name is Blaine Adamson. I own Hands On Originals in Lexington, Kentucky. Hands On Originals is a Christian promotional printing company where we design and print custom t-shirts for church groups, camps, and schools. I got into the t-shirt printing business years ago because I love to design t-shirts. I'm sure everyone has seen some really bad Christian t-shirts in their time. Sometimes they're pretty embarrassing. So for us, my hope was that we could create Christian shirts that people would actually want to wear after the event. Yeah. For all the years that I've been running Hands On Originals, I've happily served anyone who walks in the door, all walks of life. And that's why it was difficult in 2012 when a customer sued us after I politely declined to make t-shirts promoting the local Pride Festival and referred them to another local print shop. I was surprised I was sued because I've always worked with and served people who identify as gay. For example, we printed materials for a local band called Mother Jane, who played at the very Pride Festival. The lead singers both are gay. That didn't matter to me at all because we'll work with anyone, because I can't print any message that goes against my faith, no matter who asks me to print it. And whenever I can't print something, I always find another print shop who will take care of them. As is the custom for t-shirt makers and creative professionals of all kinds, I've declined plenty of orders in the past. Now, I'm from Kentucky, so one of the ones that we laugh about at the office is somebody wanted Jesus on a bucket of chicken. No idea, right? We've had shirts that promoted violence. We've had shirts for strip clubs. I couldn't in good conscience print any of those shirts. Another shirt we declined was a simple black shirt with text that just said homosexuality is a sin. I just didn't feel like Jesus would go around wearing something like that. So it was something that, he was the master of grace and truth. So we couldn't print that message. Shortly after our case started, 2 lesbian printers in New Jersey voiced their support for us because they didn't want to be forced to print messages that would violate their consciences. I was glad when a judge ruled that I had the freedom to decide which messages that I wanted to promote. An appeals court also agreed. Unfortunately, though, the local Human Rights Commission appealed those decisions, and the Kentucky Supreme Court recently agreed to hear the case. The bottom line is this: I love designing t-shirts, and I'd be crushed if I had to close down Hands-On Originals, especially after all the years of building this business, doing what I love in the community. But the reality is, all of us will find ourselves at a crossroad at some point in our lives. There will be something that we need to do, something that we know is right. And if we go against it, we give up something that's very important. We sacrifice a core part of who we are. Let's never forget that our freedoms travel together. So if Jack's forced to violate his conscience, it's only a matter of time until I'm forced to violate mine. But in America, no artist or creative professional should be forced to promote a message that violates their faith. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colorado Christian University is proud to present Jack Phillips.
Thank you. I'm Jack Phillips, owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop, just a few minutes away. Thank you so much, Centennial Institute, for hosting this rally, for CCU, for hosting us yesterday, to everyone who's spoken so far, and for giving us your support. I'm so thankful for all of you. I really am. Doug Lamborn, thank you for joining the members of Congress, even though he's not here, for signing the amicus brief in our case, defending my freedom and the freedom of all artists, and for his leadership and commitment to protecting our constitutional freedoms. As a cake designer, I've spent many years working on my craft. When I was in high school, I always had a pen, pencil, drawing in the margins of the paper, signing up for every sculpting class, every painting class, every drawing class that I could. And then I discovered, when I got a job, that I could combine my love with all this art with baking as a cake artist. Since then, I've had the joy of designing cakes for my customers for over 24 years. I welcome and serve everyone who comes into my shop, and I love doing it because I love using cakes as a canvas to express my ideas. I celebrate events with them, and I bring joy to people's lives. One of the favorite parts of my job has always been creating wedding cakes because it allows me to bring that love of my love of art, painting, sculpting, airbrushing, to create something beautiful and unique that marks the beginning of something held sacred by many. I serve all who walk through my doors, people from all walks of life. Like many other creative professionals, though, I don't create custom designs for events that conflict with my conscience. That includes a whole variety of things. I don't create cakes that celebrate Halloween. Food cakes, sexual cakes, anti-American themes, or cakes that disparage people, including those who identify as LGBT. It's never about the person making the request. It's always the message communicated through the cake. And that's why it's been shocking for me that the government would try to take away my freedoms and force me to create something that went against my faith. Even though I offered to sell the gentleman suing me pretty much anything in my shop, me declining to create one custom cake to celebrate a wedding ceremony that would directly violate my faith's teachings on marriage has resulted in 5 years of court battle, 40% loss of my business, losing half my staff, and even death threats to me and my family. Every American should be free to choose which art they create and which art they won't create, without fear of being unjustly punished by the government. It's very sad to me that the government officials in Colorado believe differently. The bottom line is that tolerance should be a two-way street. If we care about a If we care about a free Colorado and a free America, then we should all be for the constitutional principle that no one should be forced to speak or promote a message with which they disagree. If the government can force me to create custom art that is against my faith, it can force you to express messages that violate the beliefs you hold. I want to live in an America where creative professionals, all kinds, regardless of their beliefs, can live without fear of government punishment. And so I'm thankful for the U.S. Supreme Court that they've taken my case. I'm hopeful that they will uphold the constitutionally protected freedom of all artists to continue to be able to peacefully and freely create art and expression consistent with their faith and conscience. Thank you again.
I'm going to ask that you stay standing. We're going to do something for Jack here real quick. I've got 2 announcements real quick before we wrap. First, this all started with cake. We're going to end with cupcakes with American flags at the end of them. So on your way out, grab a cupcake with an American flag in it. They're not Jack's. But secondly, we need to pray for Jack. And I'm going to ask Jack to come up right here. And I'm going to ask that you would put your hands on him. If you can't get close to him, put your hands on someone in front of you. And let's pray for him. Jack, why don't you come up? Let's go right into the middle here. Dear Jesus, God, I thank you so much for Jack. I thank you for his family. I thank you that you've given them courage and strength to endure. I pray that you would give him all that he needs, Lord, to finish the race before him. Jesus, I want to pray for those 9 justices. I want to pray, Lord, that you would pour out your Spirit upon them and give them wisdom, that they would understand exactly what's before them, how critical this case is. And I pray, Lord, that you'd help them to vote in support of religious freedom for our nation. God, protect Jack. Protect his family. Be with the lawyers that will work so hard on this case. Inspire them with the right arguments so that they can go forth to argue effectively before this nation. God, we love our country. We place it before you, and we ask for your blessings upon it. That religious freedom would continue to reign for generations to come. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Great. Enjoy a cupcake. Thank you all so much for coming out.